the world's great novels. We present the fourth and final part of an adaptation of one of America's literary landmarks, The Rise of Silas Lapham by William Dean Howells, another in our series of books that live, the world's great novels.
When Silas Lapham brought his family from Vermont to Boston, his mineral paint business became more successful than he had ever dreamed. Then, the Lapham family met the aristocratic Boston Corys, and Silas was stirred by a new ambition. He began to build a mansion in the fashionable Back Bay section. He was pleased when young Tom Corey accepted a position in the Lapham firm. Was more pleased when Tom visited the Lapham home and seemed to be showing interest in his daughter Irene. In the generosity of his success, he loaned more and more money to a former partner he had selfishly forced out of his business. But then, fortune seemed to turn. To everyone's shocked amazement, Tom Corey proposed not to Irene, but to her older sister, Penelope. Irene left to nurse her heartbreak at the Lapham's old home in Vermont. Penelope, feeling ashamed and guilty because the love she shares with Tom has hurt her sister, refused to accept his proposal or to see him further. Meanwhile, the paint business slumped disastrously. The shrewdness of his former partner, Rogers, in forcing him to advance more funds, plunged Silas into debt. And the Back Bay mansion burned down in a fire he himself accidentally started. It is in the mood of reaction to such misfortune that he speaks to Persis, his wife.
I wish this tomfoolery of Penn's, the way she's carrying on, would stop. Why don't she marry Corey, Pert?
You know as well as I do, Silas. Maybe she will in time. But she's heartsick about Irene being made so unhappy. You know that.
There ain't no rhyme nor reason to it, I say. If she said the word, maybe I could get help from them.
Help from them? From the Coreys? Well, I guess things are in a bad way, Silas, if you've come to that you'd rush your daughter to making up her mind about marriage in the hopes of getting business help.
I'm in a hole, Pert. I guess I'd look anywhere for help.
Well, young Corey offered to invest money in the business. How come you turned him down?
I couldn't take his money the way things were going. Maybe I'm sorry now I didn't. I don't know. Seems like this is a hole too deep to get out of.
Silas, I've never heard you talk like this before.
Well, I've done something I never done before.
I knew you were troubled, but this is different, I can tell. What's happened?
I've sent orders to Lapham Village to shut down the paintworks.
Shut down the paintwork? Oh, no.
I had to do it, Pert.
But why, Silas?
There's some fellas out in West Virginia making paint, mineral paint like mine. Now they've struck a vein of natural gas right by their works, so they can pay 10 cents for fuel where I pay $1. They're underselling me everywhere. But that ain't the worst of it. Never thought I'd have to say this, but their paint's just as good as mine.
I guess there wasn't anything else to do then, except shut down. I don't care for myself, Silas, or about the money. But what will you do now?
Oh, I'm not altogether licked yet. Just I feel so bad about shutting down the works, that's all. Rogers claims he has some English buyers interested in those lumber mills. He put up a security with me. If we could sell them, if I could get my money back out of him, I might get straightened out yet.
Maybe it'll happen that way, Silas.
I ain't counting on it. He's talked about his English buyers, but he ain't produced them yet. If someone don't turn up, I just have to sell to the railroad for what they offer. It won't be much.
Something will surely happen. Seems like it must.
I've got one other plan. Mr. Bellingham, young Corey's uncle, I asked him to look over my affairs with me. And we've talked it over.
What is it, Silas?
I'll tell you if it works. May take me out of town some, but I'll try to leave word at the office if I can't get home.
Silas set about to meet the new threat of the competition of the West Virginia paint. He moved boldly, going to his rivals themselves. and putting on a brave front, suggested that they buy him out or that he buy them out. When he returned to Boston, he went to see James Bellingham, upon whose friendliness he relied more and more in his trouble.
They were nice enough, all right, but they're not fools. As for buying me out, they said they didn't have the money. When it comes to their selling out, they say no, because they know they've got a big thing.
I was afraid of it. You must have handled it well that they didn't see their chance to force you out.
They ain't got much money nor experience. But they're young, just like I was once. They aim to do big things. Kind of liked them. We got along. Then they said if I'd raise the capital, we could combine.
I'm afraid it can't be done. After all, your works at Lapham Village won't be worth much when they can undersell your paint. And without the threat of your competition, they'll be able to raise all the money they want.
That's just it.
You'd better sell out to them on any terms, if they'll buy.
Sell out? I only mentioned selling to them because I knew they couldn't buy. There ain't enough money in this country to buy out my paint.
Very well. I don't see how I can help you. But I'll be in my office if there's anything I can do.
All I need is the money, and not much of that. Just a little bit of cash.
Silas turned desperately everywhere. He thought of the huge stock of paint on hand, now nearly worthless, of the money he'd advanced Rogers, of the money he'd lost in stocks, of the loss he'd suffered when the fire burned his new home. It seemed that he was licked. When he returned to his office, he found a visitor.
Rogers, what are you doing here?
I have some information for you.
It's too bad you didn't give me some information before. Did you know the Central Railroad, at least the Northern?
I rather suspected that it might.
Did you know when they turned the property in on me? When you turned it in, that the Central wanted to buy the lumber mills?
I presume the road would give you a fair price for them.
You lie when you say that. You knew the road wouldn't give a fair price because it's in position to give what it chooses.
I understand you haven't done anything about the lumber mills as yet.
What can I do except wait for the railroad's offer? And take it, no matter how little it is.
I believe I mentioned to you that there are some English parties who are interested in the mills.
Yes, and I suppose you were lying about that, too.
Well, they're now in town and would like to see you.
And suppose the mills aren't for sale. Do you think I'd turn them over to someone else like you did to me? When they won't be worth 10 cents on the dollar 6 months from now?
I've come here to tell you that these English parties stand ready to take the mills off your hands at a fair valuation. At the value I put on them when I turn them into you.
Did you tell them about the Central Railroad?
I didn't think that was necessary.
You didn't. I wonder just what your game is.
If we should succeed in selling, I should be able to repay you your loans, and should have a little capital left for a venture I think of going into.
I see. And you think I'm going to steal these men's money to help you rob someone else in a new scheme?
I had an idea the money would be useful to you, too, just now.
What do you mean?
I happen to know that you've been trying to borrow.
Yes, I have been trying to borrow. But I haven't been trying to knock anyone down in the street and take the money out of their pockets. That's what this business of yours amounts to.
Now, these parties have come on from Portland to see you. I told them we would call them in Young's Hotel after dinner this evening.
You told them that, did you? Well, go and tell them I won't come.
Well, you're not obliged to sell to these parties, but you've allowed me to assure them that you talk with them. I can't go back to them and say you won't see them. They've got a right to know why.
All right. I'll go and tell them why. What time?
At 8 o'clock, please. You may ask for me. I've taken a room at the hotel.
It won't take 5 minutes for me to tell them where I stand. I'll tell them, all right. I'll tell them. I think, gentlemen, you should know my opinion in this matter. And my opinion is that there ain't a bigger scoundrel in America than Milton K. Rogers.
Oh, by Jove, you Americans are droll. I must say it's a very refreshing way to do business.
I've told you why it's impossible to sell the lumber camps. You can't laugh that off as a joke.
Well, we're grateful for the information, Colonel, but of course it's conjectural. And Besides, you may not understand our position in the matter. We're simply acting as agents for a group of people in England who are interested in a colonizing venture.
We've examined their property, and we're satisfied with the appearance of things. Eh, what?
Quite.
Quite.
But if you still have some scruple, Colonel, you may be glad to know the loss, if any, will fall upon people who will be able to bear it. An association of rich and charitable persons in England. Of course, we're quite satisfied that there'll be no loss.
No loss.
All you have to do is name your price, and we'll try to meet it.
Just what kind of business is this? I've tried to tell you...
After all, there's no reason why we shouldn't benefit from their charity, too.
You see, we've been given considerable latitude, and we won't be hard to do business with. We shan't haggle about a few pounds. If your price is higher than ours, I've no doubt you'll not be too hard on us after it's all over.
Yes, we're prepared to be generous, and I dare say we won't lose by our generosity in dealing with you.
I'll have to have time to think it over.
But how much time? We're pressed for time ourselves.
Can't let you know till tomorrow. Now I've got to go.
Perhaps I can get you a carriage. I'd like a better there myself.
No, thanks, Rogers. I'll walk home.
Hello, Silas. Mr. Rogers is here, waiting to see you.
Rogers, how did you get here? What are you doing in my home?
I decided to take a carriage and meet you here. I wanted to see you and Mrs. Lapham.
And bring up the past to her, no doubt. Well, I've more than made up to you for that.
Yes, and I appreciate it. But you still have to consider me a little in this business, too. Now, all I ask is that you give me this chance to get on my feet again. You've got no right to deprive me of it. In our dealings with each other, we should be guided by the golden rule, as I was saying to Mrs. Lapham before you came in.
Did you tell Mrs. Lapham that if I went in with you and those fellas, I should be robbing the people who trusted them?
I don't see what you've got to do with the people who sent them here. They're rich people. But why should you be so mindful of others now when you showed so little regard for me? I came to you at a time you needed help, and when you got on your feet, you kicked me out of the business.
Whatever I done, I've more than made it up. Persis, it's late. Perhaps you'd better go to bed.
All right. I will go, Silas.
But I've forgotten the past. I don't ask you to sell to those men.
Then what do you want?
Sell to me. I don't say what I'm going to do with the property, but you won't be responsible whatever happens.
Silas, maybe Mr. Rogers does...
Bert, go to bed. It's late.
Yes, sir.
I want that property, and I've got money to buy it. What will you take?
And as soon as I sold it to you, you'd sell it to that pair of rascals.
You have nothing to do with it after it's sold.
I can't give you an answer tonight. Lord knows I want to be rid of the property bad enough.
Then sell it to me. Oh, you're wasting time for nothing.
I won't give you an answer tonight.
All right. I'll call at your office first thing in the morning.
All right. Come in, Rogers.
Oh, good morning. I hope that you've
It
decided...
came in the mail, Rogers, this morning. An offer from the Central Railroad.
An offer?
Yes. And we'll have to take their measly price. Even your English friends wouldn't have nerve to pull their swindle now.
Then it's all over. You've ruined me. I haven't a cent left in the world. God help my poor wife.
With what seemed his last chance gone, Silas went on mechanically trying to raise the money he needed to save himself. Even his manner was different now. His hours were irregular. He spoke little at home and was often absent. And then he failed to come home one day. It grew later and later as Mrs. Lapham and Penelope waited.
Oh, I don't know what might have happened to him, the way he's been looking and acting.
But, Mother, he's been away a good deal lately. The way things have been.
That's what worries me so, the way things have been. Why, the man's beside himself. I don't like to send to the office to ask. It seems so strange. But I've got to know, Penelope.
But there won't be anyone at the office. The clerks have gone home.
But Mr. Corey may still be there. Send a note to him.
To Mr. Corey?
Yes, of course. He'll know where Silas is. Now go ahead. And if they don't find him at the office, tell them to take the note around to his home.
Very well, Mother. I'll send at once.
I happened to be working late, so I got your note. I supposed you must be worried, so I came myself instead of just sending word.
Oh, thank you.
Is there something I can do? Telegraph Colonel Lapham or anything?
Oh, no. It's all right now. I wonder why Father went to Lapham Village.
Something about the paintworks, I believe. I think there was someone going with him to look at them.
Everything's so unsettled now. We don't know what's happening from day to day. I'm sure Mother's glad you came yourself to tell us about Father. I mean, it's more reassuring somehow.
Well, I really must be going, Miss Penelope, but I want to ask you now when I may come again.
Well, I wonder who that can be so late. Maybe Father's... Irene! Why, Irene Lapham, whatever are you doing here?
And how are you? How's everyone? Oh, how do you do, Mr. Corey?
Good evening. I was just leaving, so, well, good night.
Good night, Mr. Corey.
Good night, Mr. Corey. Irene, we didn't expect you. What happened?
Oh, I heard about Papa's troubles, and I thought I should be home. I guess I needn't have hurried on your account.
It's the first time he's been here almost since you went away.
Yes, Mama wrote me about how foolish you've been. Well, now I'm back, and I won't have it. You're not going to be such a ninny as to keep him away on my account.
But Irene...
After all, it's insulting. I'm not going to have him or anyone else think I'm dying for a man that never cared for me. Now, where's Mama? I suppose she's all upset about Papa's troubles, too.
The next day, the Corey household was upset, too. Mrs. Corey talked with Tom at breakfast, and then took disturbing news to her husband.
It seems that Tom has changed his mind, Bromfield, about Miss Lapham.
You mean that he's no longer in love with her?
Oh, no. I mean, he's now suggesting that we call on the Laphams.
Oh?
When things were so unsettled between them, he didn't want for us to. But now the affair is evidently going on. Or at least he hopes so.
I can't very well keep up with things, but we'll do whatever you say.
She's told him there's no question of an engagement, even now, because of her father's difficulties. But he feels, and I agree with him, that at such a time we shouldn't seem indifferent.
Oh, I'm far from indifferent, my dear. It's a very disagreeable affair. The Laphams are such uncultivated people. And so far as I've seen them, I don't believe poverty will improve them any. Before, they may have been of common clay, but they were gilded with riches. That was something.
We never cared about the money, Bromfield. You know that.
No, and now we mustn't seem to care for the loss of it. That would be still worse. Well, let us hope for the best and behave as well as we know how. I'm sure you'll behave perfectly, my dear. And I shall try. I shall try.
When Silas returned from his trip, there was no need for his wife to ask if the news was good or bad.
Well, I've got to the end of my string, but tomorrow Bellingham's holding a meeting with my creditors, and I'll put myself in their hands.
Do you mean that it's all over, Silas?
Yes, it's all over. Hard to realize, but I guess there's no doubt about it. My last chance was this trip to Lapham Village. There was a fellow from New York who wanted to go in business with me. He had the money, plenty of it. And he liked the looks of things, but I had to tell him where I stood. If it would have saved me, I could have bought in with the West Virginia firm on less money. But I had to tell him what I planned to do, so he backed out. He's gone back to New York.
Will everything go?
I can't tell yet. The creditors will have a chance at everything, every cent. I'm sorry for you, Bert, and the girls.
Oh, don't talk of us. It makes no difference that way. But you're built so high, and honest, too. It don't seem right everything you built should fall down.
I guess there was something wrong with it. Wrong all the way.
The creditors held their meeting. They praised Silas for his sincerity and remembered how capable he had been in success. They offered to give him time to let him go on, but he had decided to go back and begin again in the hills at Lapham Village, selling his Boston property in payment of his debts. At last, he talked it over with James Bellingham.
It wouldn't be any use going on, not against the West Virginia Company. I'd just be getting everybody in all the deeper.
It's not much comfort to you, but you've acted like a gentleman.
I reckon that surprises you.
Yes, it does. It's hard to act like a gentleman when your vital interests are at stake.
Oh, well, Mrs. Lapham acts glad to be going back to Lapham Village. I guess she remembers too much trouble where we are. Irene's all anxious to fix up the old house. And Penelope, well, I guess she'd rather be any place than where she is. But I'll miss it.
Maybe it'll seem better when you get back, starting over again. After all, the West Virginia crowd agreed they couldn't match your Persis line of paint for quality. They'll leave that field to you. It's small scale compared to what you've known, but it'll keep you busy.
Oh, I'm glad of the chance to go back. I'll be glad to see those old hills again. They haven't changed, but I have.
The owners of the West Virginia company that had helped force him out of business respected Silas Lapham, and they took young Corey with them on his recommendation, took him to do the very job he had joined the Lapham firm to do, to introduce their paint in Mexico and South America. Before Tom Corey left, he went to Lapham Village to see Penelope once again.
But this doesn't change things for me. I don't say that it's wrong, but I can't make it seem right. I told you before that as long as Father is in trouble, I can't let you think of me. Now that he's lost everything...
I don't think that's a very good reason. Do you believe me when I say that I love you?
I suppose I must.
What is it that you're thinking of, then?
Oh, of Irene, I guess. Of how much I hurt her.
But you didn't hurt her.
She cared for you first.
But I never cared for her at all.
She thought you did.
That was nobody's fault. Surely not yours.
Would you want a girl who hadn't a cent in the world and who'd cheated and betrayed her own sister?
All I know is I want you.
But I should always despise myself. No, if you won't give me up, then I must give up you.
Is that your answer? If it is, I suppose I must submit.
Why, I know you. You think I'm capricious and fickle. I can't help it. Oh, it's best that you're going. Can't you see that? It's really a blessing for us. We won't see each other, and we'll forget. Why, it's the finest thing that could happen to us. After all, you'll be gone for years and... Oh, Tom, take me with you. I can't give you up. I tried to do without you, but I won't. You will take me with you, won't you?
Take you with me? Why, I have to take you with me. Father got the steamship tickets, and he reserved passage for 2. As the years went by with Silas back in Lapham Village, the West Virginia Company bought the mines and paint works at Lapham, relieving Silas of debt and giving him an interest in the larger enterprise which once he had hoped to control himself. His success was forgotten, but not his failure, for James Bellingham stopped by at Lapham Village to visit him and his wife. They sat on the veranda of the old house where they'd first lived together as the sun went down over the Vermont hills.
Well, sir, the company's branching out all over, just like I said it would. Those young fellas out in West Virginia have get up and go, I tell you. You need young blood, I always say.
I'm glad you can stay overnight, Mr. Bellingham. I hope we can make you comfortable.
Oh, I'm sure I will be. Thank you, Mrs. Lapham.
Of course, the old house ain't what it might be, but it's sound. I'm aiming to put in steam heat and naphtha gas before the winter.
There are many who would envy you such a home, with steam heat or without.
And it ain't exactly what we planned for our old age, is it, Pat? Sometimes I wonder how it all happened. Get to thinking it over, it comes to me that maybe I done wrong about Rogers in the first place. Taking him in the business, then forcing him out. I guess the whole trouble came from that.
You did have chances to save yourself in your business. Have you ever had any regrets you didn't take them?
Well, I don't know as I should always say it paid, but if the thing was to do over again, right in the same way, I guess I should have to do it.
Look, Si, the sun's going down over the mill pond. I never get tired of that sight.
The view ain't quite as fashionable as from the Back Bay side of Beacon Street, but I do believe the sunset's prettier.
The Rise of Silas Lapham by William Dean Howells is one of the world's great novels brought to you each week by the NBC University of the Air. Listen next week to the first of a 3-part radio version of The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, the first of all detective novels, and said still to be the only perfect one. To add to your enjoyment of this series, we recommend the Handbook of the World's Great Novels, which you may obtain by sending 25 cents to World's Great Novels, Post Office Box 30, Station J, New York 27, New York. That's Post Office Box 30, Station J, New York 27. The Rise of Silas Lapham was adapted for radio by Jack C. Wilson. The music was composed by Emil Soderstrom, and the orchestra was directed by Bernard Berquist. The entire production was under the direction of Homer Heck. Jess Pugh was featured as Silas Lapham, and Hope Summers as Persis Lapham. Penelope was played by Geraldine Kay, and Tom Corey by Harry Elders. Bromfield Corey was played by Sherman Marks, Mrs. Corey by Hilda Graham, Milton Rogers by Ted Liss, Irene by Martha McCain. The narrator was Ken Nordine. James Bellingham was played by John Barclay, and the Englishman by Jonathan Hole and Cliff Norton. This is John Conrad. This program comes to you from Chicago and is a presentation of the National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations. This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.